today? Perfect. All right, well, I guess we're gonna get started. I just wanted to say good morning. I'm Jamie Pasquinelli, District Manager of ULI Pittsburgh. I'm so excited that you could join us today. I hope you all have your coffee and are ready for a fantastic program. A shout out and thank you to our event sponsors for supporting this amazing program. Additionally, and as always, I would like to thank our annual sponsors for supporting ULI Pittsburgh's mission. We could not do this without our sponsors, so thank you so very much. Please make sure you have your mics muted throughout the program to prevent any distractions. Also, there will be a Q&A throughout the program. So if you would like at any point to put your question in the chat, we will definitely pull that out and get to that. This program will be recorded. I will be sending out a link in the next couple of days if you miss anything. And I think that is it for me. So I will now hand it over to Lynn DiLorenzo, Principal at Core, who will be our moderator today. Lynn?
Jamie, thank you. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Lynn DiLorenzo. I'm a member of the ULI Executive Management Committee and happy to moderate and navigate us through ULI's joint program featuring executives of the Port Authority and the head of a new organization working towards a more multimodal future. Before we begin, you will note in the program flyer that we have allocated 90 minutes for the content to provide a thorough overview, but we will make every effort to finish a little early. We appreciate your time, but we would like you to walk away with a better understanding of where the BRT begins and ends, key transit stops along the way, transit-oriented development, along with what's next in transit. As Jamie said, there'll be a Q&A following the BRT presentation, so please be prepared to ask questions. The Port Authority wants to hear from you. We've all heard about the BRT project for a long time and the importance of connecting the second and third largest economic generators in the state. And now it's on its way to reality, but there are still some steps along the pathway to completion. We are fortunate today to have Catherine Kellerman, CEO, and David Huffaker, Chief Development Officer of the Port Authority, and Chris Sandvig of Mobilify, the new organization we're talking about, all join us to walk through the important transit project and the importance of transit. Just a brief bio overview. Catherine Kellerman serves as Chief Executive Officer of the Port Authority of Allegheny County, the public transit system serving the Pittsburgh region. Catherine often tells her staff and community to dream big, and she means it. She sets her sights high for herself and her team, and most importantly, she follows through. Since joining Port Authority in 2018 as CEO, Catherine is focused on providing safe, reliable, more affordable, and accessible transit services to the Pittsburgh region. She has established better communication with customers, fought to find creative and incremental solutions for a more equitable fare system, and championed the development of a 25-year plan for the agency. As the 15th biggest bus agency and one of the top 25 biggest transit agencies in the country, Port Authority serves critical service to the region. I'll finish the other bios and then I'll welcome Catherine. David Huffaker joined the Port Authority of Allegheny County as the Chief Development Officer in September 2018. In that role, David oversees the engineering and technical support functions, long-range planning, scheduling, contracted services, and the transit-oriented communities programs. He joined the authority after a 15-year stint in Sound Transit, a regional provider of express bus, commuter rail, and light rail in Seattle, Washington. And last but not least, Chris Sandvig, founder and executive director, Mobilify, Southwestern Pennsylvania. While Mobilify is a new organization, it's founded on the principles, technical knowledge, advocacy experience, and community-based experience that Chris has honed to drive progressive transportation systems for over a decade. who spent 12 years at the PCRG successfully advocating for new transit funding, prioritizing community revitalization in transportation policy. Oh, there's a lot of words, Chris. And procuring funds, important words, procuring funds for projects and bringing Railvolution to Pittsburgh, which was really important in 2018. With that, I will welcome Catherine Kellerman.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to ULI, and thanks for your interest and support for transit. I've been getting used to face-to-face meetings, so seeing my head this big on a screen is a bit disconcerting, but here we are. We're really looking forward to talking to you about a bunch of BRT projects today, but I wanted to first talk a little bit about a little bit of what we've been doing at Port Authority. So clearly, like all of our other friends, we are ideally wrapping up the COVID pandemic. You know, there's different variants. People should be wearing masks. They shouldn't be wearing masks, so on and so forth. But we're optimistic that we're in much more of a home stretch than we've seen before. We've gone several weeks without anyone on our staff testing positive. It remains the case. There's not a single documented case in the U.S. of anyone getting COVID from transit. So we're very happy to keep that record going. Lining up with the governor's orders, we have lifted our capacity constraints last week. We had been limiting our vehicles to half-seated capacity to give folks a chance to get a little bit more distance. And until about 3 or 4 months ago, this was not really an issue. Now, as people have been coming back to work, people have been getting their vaccinations. I shouldn't say coming back to work. They've been coming back to a work location as opposed to being remote. I'm sitting in the corner of my living room. You see the hungry caterpillar up there, but I'm still working. And I think that's the case for many of us here. But as folks have shifted back to an in-person situation or they're going to more events, we've been seeing ridership coming back on our services. And we are excited to participate in this return. Now, we are still under a CDC/TSA requirement that anyone on a transit vehicle is wearing a mask. So while it's been lifted in many places by the governor's order, for CDC and Transportation Security Administration, you're still wearing a mask if you're on a transit vehicle or you're at a location that serves a transit vehicle. So you're still seeing us with our masks. People ask us all the time, when are we going to go back to normal? When service is going to go back to normal? The world we knew on March 13th is gone. That world is going to come back differently, but the way that we use transit, the way that we valued it, the way that we judged efficiency on transit, that universe is gone. Which on the one hand is daunting because we don't know where we're getting to as the future goes on, but it's really exciting because here's a great time to recast, rebrand, and rebuild transit in a way which is not just equitable, but it's really doing what we want it to do and not the bare minimum that we can afford. So we're really excited about that. We have really great data for how many people are on what route where, and you can see a lot of this shared on portauthority.org. I will be spending a lot of time watching these shifts. So September comes around, we anticipate seeing ridership returning from our major universities, more students from PPS and other schools taking service, things kind of settling down, seeing what commute patterns look like. So we're staying really flexible to see what the demand is and where we need to be going. It's a true fact that we have a huge history of transit here in Pittsburgh. In 2007 and 2010, 2011, we did a lot of service reductions to line up with state funding. We have huge unmet demand. So the issue here is not, will ridership come back? The issue is, what will we look like as that ridership comes back? During COVID, we saw a lot of folks continuing to use our transit services. Of our 98 routes, 97 serve a grocery store or a medical facility. So let's think about that. 97 out of 98 routes, almost every single route is hitting a grocery store or a medical location or both. So honestly, through COVID, Port Authority, yes, I'm bragging because that's who we are, Port Authority made Allegheny County stay functional. The folks who were putting our groceries together, whether we were doing pickup or delivery, the folks who were handling the backup medical, so people who did have COVID or had concerns or had pre-existing conditions could get the treatment they needed. That was made possible by Port Authority. So it's been interesting to see that shift to really valuing not just, transit service, but putting a priority on really good, solid transportation service. We've seen a lot of folks continue to use us to make their essential connections. COVID didn't break things. COVID showed us what was broken. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show us what to give us the ability to tackle things that aren't really working, say it that way. Breaks you out of your old ways of thinking. And we're using this as a chance to sort of remake Port Authority. We've been talking in 2019 about rebranding, not something that you do in a pandemic, but it's, now we're much more information about what our communities value from transit and transportation and how we move forward with that. We will be bringing forward a fare change this year. That's part 1 of 4 in making it easier for folks to get to using their fare, making it more equitable. At $2.75, our cash fare is still one of the highest in the country. It's been that high about almost going on 10 years. So we're not dropping it, we're not raising it. We are discontinuing the Connect card discount, that 25-cent discount. But now for a Connect card or stored value user, when you tap, $2.75 will get you a 3-hour pass. It won't be just a trip and a transfer, it's a 3-hour pass. We're also getting rid of, now bear with me, monthly and weekly passes, but they're going to rotating. So instead of a pass for June, you'll get a 31-day pass. This is helpful if your payday doesn't line up with the 1st or the 30th. If your payday is the 5th, if you are in a shift work kind of job and you're saving up your money during the week, if you use a weekly pass and your paycheck comes in on Thursday, this week you can get your weekly pass on that Thursday now, or 7-day pass. So we're looking forward to that flexibility. We had done a lot of work looking at fare capping. If it turns out that our flexible passes are still dropping some folks out that could benefit from fare capping, that's still in the process. It's just an 18-month process to reprogram things. And I'd hate to ask folks to wait 18 months when we think we can get benefits now. Now, as I said, that's the first of 4 stages. Our next stage will be the mobile ticketing services. Many of you have signed up to pilot our mobile ticketing services. We say that instead of the app, because the app is the forward facing on your phone, but the ticketing services sort of encompass everything else. So as we're moving forward with all those mobile ticketing services, making it easier for folks to get your fare on your phone. 84% of our passengers have a smartphone. Not everyone has a bank account though. So the mobile ticketing services also include digitization of cash. Now, that to me makes me think of the introduction in the Matrix with all the figures floating. Not the case. Digitization means someone could go to a convenience store or a corner store, scan a code on their phone, hand over some cash, and then the clerk scans the code and puts that cash onto the account. So we're excited about that. Another iteration will be looking at how hard it is for folks to walk to get to a fare location. The goal being that nobody has to go more than a quarter mile. And we'll use some new technology for that. And my dog is about to bark. Please excuse us. And then the final component on this is what can we do for folks that are still outside of that gap, right? She's going to keep barking. I hope everyone bears with me. So that's 4 stages to make it easier for folks to get the cash. Hold on real quick. Everyone heard me ask my husband to get the dog. Sorry about that. Another way we'll increase access to fare media is through TVM throughout the BRT project. Every station will have a TVM, so everyone will be able to get their fare card ahead of time. So now you've heard my 7-year-old, welcome to my house in the morning. And just in time for it to get loud, I'm going to turn over to David Huffaker, our fantastic Chief Development Officer, to walk a little bit more through some of our projects. And then it'll be David and my dear friend, Chris Sandvig, and me back for questions. So I'm going to turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And good morning, everyone. I am David Huffaker, Chief Development Officer here at Port Authority. And I will transition into my slideshow. Hopefully everyone can see this. So I've been asked to talk about BRT and the TOD program and what the opportunities are in the BRT corridor. And I just want to emphasize that I wouldn't call myself an expert in anything, but I'm more of an expert in transit, and I can speak to the BRT project. We have what we believe are great concepts that will be supportive of development throughout the corridor. And I actually would be very interested in hearing from the development community as well. What are some of the elements of the project that are particularly valuable or of interest to the future development for the corridor, and to provide additional walkability and accessibility to our transit system, which is really the core goal of the project. as well as to support the development of a healthy community. So I'm going to take you through a few slides here that will provide a little bit of a grounding of what bus rapid transit is. Many of you will have seen these slides before, so I will hopefully not spend a huge amount of time. And I really would like for this to be a dialogue with the community and the participants to hear what some of the questions are, what are some of the attributes of the project that are of particular interest and value, and how best we can work together to support a healthy community. So, and I do want to acknowledge Amy Silberman and Breen Massiotra, who are two of my stars at the Port Authority, who really have done yeoman's work putting this presentation together, and as well as just developing the programs that you're going to hear about today. And so I will encourage you all to listen and ask questions. I think through the chat will be the best way to do it. I will try to monitor the chat, but I've asked Lynn to also help moderate some of those questions to make sure that I hit the questions that do come up. So we talk about bus rapid transit, and I think a lot of us have ideas of what that is, but I wanted to just provide a little bit of context of kind of some of the basic foundation of bus rapid transit. So here you see just a standard street. The biggest element for us is a dedicated travel lane. You see that red bus lane. And while there are some very limited bus lanes throughout the downtown triangle, and we have a contraflow lane in Oakland, there really are not a huge amount of transit-only lanes in the city of Pittsburgh. And so this will help provide an extension of that program. Transit signal priority is also a core element. We will have lights that will be supportive, not just of transit, but also pedestrian access and improved vehicle throughput. So we expect that there should be improvements in all throughput throughout the corridor. Specially branded buses. Many of the BRT projects have kind of catchy names. Ours, we still call the Downtown-Uptown-Oakland Bus Rapid Transit Project, and we're going to be coming out with branding as the project comes closer to our revenue service date. But we will have some limited battery electric buses as well. Many of you may know we have 2 battery electric buses on site today that we're testing, kicking the tires, if you will. We put it out on many of our routes. We have 6 more buses on order, and they should be received later this year and put out into service. And the BRT project is slated to add 15 more battery electric buses. And the 15 for BRT will actually be the larger 60-foot buses with the articulated section in the middle. And that's particularly exciting because there are not as many battery electric 60-foot buses in the country. So we will be one of the leaders there. Upgraded stations, the stations, and I'll have some, we have some renderings of representative stations in several of the corridors that I'll go through next, but we will have some upgraded stations with real-time information, fare payment, ticket vending machines as Catherine described. And actually I have a few other bells and whistles that I'll be able to point out on some of these other slides. Upgraded pedestrian amenities. We, I think, all have experienced crumbling sidewalks, very difficult crosswalks, lights that don't necessarily support a pedestrian environment or a bike environment. And our project, in partnership with the city Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, should bring significantly upgraded pedestrian amenities throughout the corridor. So we're excited about that. Changes to street parking, there will be some changes. As we add a transit-only lane and add some bike facilities, there will be some changes to street parking. That's really under the purview of the city and DOMI, but that is something that is relevant and core to the project itself. And then, of course, there's also development opportunities, and we've got some examples of that. Again, I think we all recognize that the city of Pittsburgh is primed for some growth and development. This corridor has already seen a lot of growth, but there are certainly opportunities throughout. to both increase accessibility and affordability throughout that corridor. So we look forward to bringing that to downtown, uptown Oakland and the branches. So another question that is a fairly core question is, where will the BRT go? And so we've got this rendering. It's a little bit tricky and hard to see from a distance. What you have, and I'll just advance to the next section. So in the box surrounded by red is what we call the core BRT corridor, and that's downtown, uptown, and Oakland. And that area will see the heaviest investment in terms of some of those pedestrian amenities, the bike facility, the station infrastructure, signal infrastructure, those sorts of things. That will be most heavily invested in this core area. However, the BRT routes, and for those who are familiar with the route structure of the Port Authority, it's not all, but not exclusively, but generally the routes 61s and 71s that go off to locations in Highland Park and Regent Square and on East Busway and McKeesport. Those routes will feed into the BRT corridor. And so you will have branches that peel off and go onto the East Busway out to Wilkinsburg. That's actually where we're going to have some opportunity charging for the battery electric buses. So Wilkinsburg will be a terminus for one of the routes. Highland Park and Shadyside branch is another one. And then the other key area is heading out east into Squirrel Hill, and one branch that goes off towards Regent Square, and another branch that would head off towards Homestead and Points East. So, but again, the focus and probably the heaviest investment and the most immediate investment will be here in this red box. But we'll be able to talk about that in a little bit. So I had mentioned some of the representative stations, and I've got an example from downtown, uptown, and Oakland. The stations will not be unique in the sense of any station along the BRT corridor should look like the others in a general look and feel. There are some different sizes. We have 60-foot stations, 30-foot stations, and 15-foot stations, depending on the expected use and ridership, and location and the accessibility of the sidewalks. So this is an example of the station that's proposed for Market Square in downtown. And most of these stations that you will see today would, of course, have a shelter, provide some seating for transit passengers, real-time information so that you can see when your next bus to your destination would be arriving, ticket vending machines, and the ability to pay for your fare. And the expectation is that we will have off-board fare payment, which will speed up the accessibility of people getting off the bus and on the bus. Currently, for those who have seen operations, if you've got a lot of people getting on the bus, they all file in through the front door. It's very slow as each person gets to the validator, they tap their Connect card, and even when it moves seamlessly, it takes a number of seconds per person. So if you have 20, 30 people getting on at a particular stop, it can take well over a minute to load the bus. With the BRT project, we would have off-board fare payment, which allows us to open up the 3 doors on the 60-foot bus. And so people can get off very quickly, they get on very quickly, and we don't have to deal with fares on the bus, which will be a huge advantage and will speed up the throughput throughout the corridor. So this is a typical station downtown. Here's a rendering of the station at Duquesne University in Uptown. This is an interesting one. We've actually spoken to Duquesne University themselves. They're very interested in incorporating this design into their station master plan and into their development that's underway. So they've been very interested in hearing about the BRT project as well. But again, and it's hard to see here, but you can see the same elements with the glass roof and the shelter and the TVMs, ticket vending machines, and off-board fare payment. I also neglected to mention, we will have emergency phones at most of our station locations, and there are also going to be security cameras that feed into our Pitt Tower police facility, so that there is a security presence, both through our roving patrols, but also through surveillance and the ability for customers to speak directly to someone in security who can help them out if there is a particular issue that comes up. It's not dissimilar to when you're traveling to a college campus and you see the blue light facility that allows people, if someone feels at risk, they can communicate with security and public safety. We'll have similar infrastructure at our stations. And then the next station location here, this happens to be up at University of Pittsburgh in Oakland. And again, you can see the rendering of the station. Again, same design or same general look and feel. So when you're going through the system, you will know I am on the BRT system, and you will recognize it through the buses, through the extra facilities that are available. And hopefully through the improved service as well. I want to emphasize, I've had people ask me if the stations will look like our station in Oakland that is at Fifth and Atwood. That is not the design of the stations. This is, I don't want to call it Spartan, but it's a little simpler and replicable. That Fifth and Atwood station is a little bit more bespoke. It's has some unique features that are only appropriate for that particular location. So Fifth and Atwood is not necessarily a good example of the design style, although it incorporates many of the elements, real-time signage, ticket vending machines, and the ability for off-board fare payment. So it's representative of the functionality, but the style is going to be somewhat different. Hopefully that makes sense, but we can talk about that as well. So those are the stations. Now I've had sort of this project, and your participation today is focused primarily on transit-oriented development. And so there's a question about, well, what is transit-oriented development and how does it relate to the bus rapid transit project? And in a sense, sort of to dial it down to its core elements, transit-oriented development is dense, it's mixed use, and it's walkable. And I think this illustration here really provides a good example of a traditional, I'll call it a strip mall, although there's not a lot of mall to this parking facility that you see in the left, but many lanes of traffic. There's not a lot of landscaping. There's no, the pedestrian facilities, if there are any, are very poor and not inviting of people actually participating by foot. And so when you see the picture on the right, which has much more of a feel, it almost feels like a Disneyfication, if you will. It puts it on a scale that's more people-oriented, encourages people to walk. It provides shelter. A day like today, having some tree cover is welcome, and provides some additional capabilities to feel human while you're in the city. And that's important because every transit trip, to some extent, begins and ends with a sidewalk. And so we really want to have that walkable functionality that encourages people and allows people to access the system. So our bus rapid transit project will have some additional landscaping, will improve the bike facility, will improve the sidewalks, will improve the signals so that all of these functions are much more in line with a people-scaled development. And of course, density is important for transit-oriented development. I think that's the secret sauce of the BRT project, is it's running through some of the densest neighborhoods in Pittsburgh. Downtown, of course, is heavily business oriented, but there is an increasing amount of residential downtown. Uptown has the bones of an amazing multifunctional mixed use neighborhood with residential, universities, hospitals, and small business that is perfect for a transit oriented development type development. Now, I do want to emphasize, we have a document and it's on our website that is our transit-oriented development guidelines. I'm going to hold the document up here. Very hard to see in a world with a probably 1 inch by 1 inch picture of me, but I would encourage you to, if you haven't seen them, to go to our website and look for our transit-oriented development guidelines, because that provides much more detail of how transit and development can work together to create a really livable community. Now, as I think I said at the start, you folks and the development community would be experts on what development opportunities are there in this BRT corridor. However, I do have some thoughts, and Breen has helped pull together some of the various elements of major destinations, particularly in this downtown core. And one other thing I should point out that I hadn't done earlier, it's a little hard to see, but on the map, you can see these little circles that show where the actual station locations are proposed to be. So you can see one right next to PPG Paints Arena. That's the pair to the Duquesne University station, or the location at Duquesne University that I showed you earlier. I also would be remiss if I didn't speak to the routing specifics here. The BRT project would be inbound on Fifth Avenue. So starting up in Oakland, going past the University of Pittsburgh and Carlo, it would move down Fifth Avenue past PPG Paints Arena through Uptown, and then continue on Fifth Avenue. So it's a reversal of the downtown loop that operates today. So the buses would continue through Fifth Avenue over to Liberty, and make a right turn onto Liberty at the Market Square Park, or Triangle Park at Market Square, and then turn back on 6th Avenue, where there would be a station at Wood Street and one over at Steel Plaza to connect to the light rail system. And then heading back out of town, there's the crossover over to Forbes, and the buses would head out through Forbes. And so there's about 5 stations in Uptown, and then several more up in the Oakland area, and then it moves off to branches. So just hitting a few of the highlights of some of the key elements. We've highlighted here some of the medical facilities, and obviously there's a huge presence of medical hospitals and facilities throughout this corridor. We also have 2 key development efforts that have been done in the past. There's the Uptown Eco Innovation District in Uptown. This was a City of Pittsburgh Planning Department effort, and that was done, actually, it was adopted in 2017, but has been guiding some of the development principles in Uptown since that time. And that's another document I would encourage you to take a look at. And then the Pittsburgh Innovation District in Oakland. So you've got significant City of Pittsburgh planning resources available to guide some of the development in these corridors as well. You also have universities. You've got Duquesne, you've got Carlo, University of Pittsburgh. What you don't see here, the further east is Carnegie Mellon. You also have Point Park in downtown. So the number of college students in this corridor is huge. And then the Central Business District, of course, being one of the largest job centers in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, is a key market that we are connecting to some of those centers in Uptown and Oakland. And then some of the cultural and sports facilities. You've got the Cultural District, the Civic Arena redevelopment, and of course, PPG Paints Arena. So there are a lot of destinations, a lot of reasons to go on this corridor, and that will see improved connectivity. Pardon me as the sun now hits right through my window, so I'm a little bit washed out. But the corridor serves some of the largest destinations and destination points in the city of Pittsburgh. Now, TOD opportunities in the corridor. Well, the Uptown Eco Innovation District highlights some of the opportunities in in Uptown. You've got the Civic Arena redevelopment that's underway. There are other elements in Oakland, Carlo P3 and the Oakland Portal Boulevard and Zulima and Forbes and Mayron. And countless other opportunities that are also available in this corridor. So I would say there are a lot of opportunities here. I would be remiss to say that this is a complete list, but it just gives you a sense of how some of the planned and future development sinks in with this corridor. So then I also, of course, get a lot of questions about funding and next steps for the BRT project. So this project has a budget of over $200 million, and it is, we have a partnership with Allegheny County, with the city of Pittsburgh, and the Federal Transit Administration. And the Federal Transit Administration would be the biggest individual funder of this project. And we have applied for what's called a Small Starts Grant, which is through the FTA's Capital Investment Grant Program. And that is for projects that are 300 million or smaller. And the feds, since they are making a large investment in the project, go through a readiness review that determines whether their grant funding is ready to be allocated or ready to be distributed to the Port Authority. The funding, actually, President Trump in 2020 actually made an announcement allocating the funding to this BRT project. What that means, and you may have heard that and said, well, the project's already gotten its funding. It provided the certainty that when the project has reached its readiness milestones, that the funding would be provided by the FTA. But there are still some review steps that need to occur as we work with the Federal Transit Administration. And so that review is ongoing. We started earlier this year. They do a risk review where they look at our project plan. They take a look at our assumptions. They take a look at the risk that's built into the project and make their assessment. We're in the process of working through that. Once that is complete and they provide a statement of readiness, then the funding can be released and we'll be able to construct the project. And once that occurs, we believe there will be about a 2-year construction period throughout the corridor. That doesn't mean that at any single point there will be construction for 2 years at that location, but the duration throughout the corridor will be 2 years. We do think there are some elements of the project that we'll be able to move forward on a little quicker time frame. So we will do some of those easier elements or simpler elements as quickly as possible. But you can expect that it will take us into 2024 for the complete project development. But we do hope to have certain elements open in 2023. There was a recent announcement a couple weeks ago from the federal government that the BRT project in Pittsburgh, this one, had been awarded $19.3 million from the American Relief Plan. That is over and above the grant announcement or the grant that we have applied for. So that's wonderful news. That's money that is available to us to use for local match. So if we get to a point where we need to provide additional local match, this funding will be instrumental in helping support that. So we're working through the process, and I don't have any additional information exactly on schedule, but I'm happy to try to address any questions that might come up. So at this point, I'm going to leave the slides up here, and in fact, I'm going to go backwards if I can, just to highlight maybe some of the I'll probably leave it on this one just so we have the corridor up on the screen. And I would be happy to answer any questions that have come up in chat. I have not been able to follow those. So Lynn, if you can moderate and guide me through some questions, I'd be happy. I think we're about on time. So I think we've got about
I think we're fine. We're fine, David. The first question came in from Angela Gillot. And will any of these routes include South Oakland and the Pittsburgh Technology Center?
So the short answer is no. We will be connecting, probably the closest we get to South Oakland is near Craft Avenue. We are working and we'll actually talk about some other connections to the Hazelwood area as part of the next transit process. So I might hold on that. This corridor really is focused on that Fifth and Forbes corridor.
Okay, next question from Lisa Kelly. How will existing traffic along Fifth and Forbes be impacted? Where will it be directed and redirected?
That's a great question, and it kind of depends on which block you're talking about and the time that occurs. I know from my time, and I've been in Pittsburgh for 3 years, and as I go through Uptown, even I'm saying, oh my gosh, this place has changed so much. There is a huge amount of work going on, particularly in Uptown, but you see it throughout Oakland and the Central Business District as well. And so we are working with the city. That's probably, I can't get real specific about a particular location, but we work with the city for a maintenance and protection of traffic. And that really will be a block by block and week by week type thing. We recognize it's going to be a big interrupter to all elements of the corridor. And so that's something that we'll be working very closely with the city of Pittsburgh and the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. And the other piece that I should mention is we will have a robust communication plan that will provide more direction for both residents, business owners, and other interested stakeholders throughout this corridor that will provide a look ahead of the work that's going to be performed and when that's going to be performed. And certainly if your individual property was going to be impacted, you would get an in-person visit from one of our construction support people to help walk you through what the timing looks like. And I'm not able to speak to a particular property location at this time.
Hey, David, another question from Derek Tillman. Will parking along Fifth Avenue be eliminated on both sides? Let me make sure I got that question exactly correct. Will parking on Fifth Avenue and Uptown be eliminated on both sides of the street?
So we're working with the city on the impacts to parking. Again, some of it is block by block related, and we're working with property owners and business owners to maintain as much parking as possible. But there will be significant changes with the addition of the transit lane and the bike lane. So there are parts of the city where there will be elimination of parking on both sides of the street. And I don't know, Amy, if you've got a better answer than that, but I think, again, the city of Pittsburgh is working with the individual property owners in that corridor.
Yeah, I'll just add, hi everyone, Amy Silverman with Port Authority. I'll just add that for the eastern half or so of Uptown, parking will be eliminated on the right side of the street in the direction of travel, so the side that the buses serve. And then in the area closer to PPG Paints Arena, there will be parking eliminations in I think it's about 2 blocks long on both sides of the street.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay, David, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Can you go back and highlight the difference between our transit authority buses today in our public transit system and the BRT buses? Just a little bit of the difference between those vehicles.
That's a good question. So I'm not even going to go to the picture because that picture is so comic book like that it really doesn't give you an indicator. So what you will see is the buses that are on the BRT system will all be 60-foot buses, of which we do have some of those today, but they will also have a separate branding. So let's just call it the Downtown-Oakland-East BRT. That branding will be on the side of the bus, and it'll be on the head sign, so you'll be able to see that it's something different from a local service. And what you will also have is, while you still will have validators on the bus, most of the buses and at the stations, all doors will open at the same time, so people can get off and then on without having to go to the front of the bus and tap. The buses themselves will be very similar. There may be some branding branding and design elements that are slightly different because we do want it to be distinctive. And in fact, that's one of the FTA queries, is that the bus and the branding feels something distinct from a normal Port Authority transit service. So you will not have buses that are multiple colors going through the corridor where you see a blue one and a red one and a yellow one and you're not sure what's what. They will all have the same look and feel, and it will be something distinct from the rest of the system. And there will be that, as I described, that limited number of battery electric buses. The entire fleet will not be battery electric, but you will have our only 60-foot battery electric buses will be on the BRT system.
David, thank you. Seeing no other questions, I think that we can segue over and to bring Catherine Kellerman back into the discussion along with Chris Sandvig, where the Port Authority talks about their next transit plan and what's next in transit in general. Oh, we had another question come in.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll jump over to that. Can you describe the change in regular traffic flow and only as you travel west on Fifth to downtown? Gary Desjardins. Thank you, Gary.
Okay, so I might actually defer to Amy on this one to talk about the specifics. Sorry to punt.
Sure, no problem. So in general, traveling west on Fifth Avenue towards downtown, there will be, as you look towards downtown, there will be on the rightmost side of the street a bus lane, and then a travel lane, and then a parking lane. And then for parts of the neighborhood, there will also be a single direction, and in some cases, a bidirectional bike lane. So one bus lane, one drive lane, and one park lane.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additional questions before we move on to the next segment of the program? And if you think of another question, we'll have a brief Q&A towards the end of the program. Can you take down the slide, the current slide deck, and then we can move, or can you leave that open?
You know what I think I'll do is I'll move over to the next. We have one slide that just shows the next transit program.
Okay, good. Leave that up.
I'm going to, as I have tended to do a lot in this presentation, is defer to others. So maybe Catherine can introduce sort of her vision for what the long range plan will do, and then we can talk through some of the specifics here. And I probably, again, Amy Silberman, the Director of Planning and Service Development, is a key leader of this element of the Port Authority plan. So I would like to give her some credit as well. But Catherine, please kick it off.
Okay, good morning again. Okay, planners, this is what I want to say. Make no small plans. Make no little plans. They have no power to stir men's blood. So let's rephrase that. Got to dream big. If we do the moonshot, what's the worst that can happen? So Pittsburgh and Allegheny County clearly deserve a lot of investment. When we look at our friends in other cities, our peer agencies, our friends overseas, they don't have 35-year-old shelters on their bus infrastructure. They also don't have trains which are running on a unique gauge, but they're not dealing with only a system that was grown once and is stagnating while the rest of the city is growing. So there's no reason we can't have nice things. So let us dream big. Part of the next transit exercise has been, where do we want to go and what do we want to see happen, so we can start putting some flesh around that. This will not be cheap, but I wouldn't say anything that we want to do infrastructure-wise is cheap. If it is cheap, it's not going to be safe. It's not going to match up what our requirements are. I have small kids. I use this example a lot. You get a can of frosting, you can only frost so many cupcakes. In transit and transportation planning, we often think we can get to 15, 20, 30 cupcakes, right? Because we want to do so much on limited resources, but then everybody just gets the cupcake that they hate. So why not see what we have to do to get the resources to provide what should be a really good minimum unit of transit, dignified infrastructure where people can wait outside of the elements, where they have access to a restroom. It shouldn't be playing like the lottery to try to figure out where you can go in a city without having to plan in a bathroom break. I say that both as a parent and a patron of public transit. We should have the ability not to make everybody come into downtown. I love downtown, but if you're not coming there, let's get you more directly to your corridor. We should, as a major landowner in Pittsburgh, I think we have a lot that we can bring to the table to support affordable housing. Yes, it is wonderful if we can connect disadvantaged moms to really great prenatal care, so we can fundamentally change your outcomes and set these children on a path to success. But why not use some of our dirt to put some of these clinics into neighborhoods that don't have that access, and then continue to build a transit network? So if we don't dream what we want to accomplish, we're never going to get there. Port Authority's last long range plan was developed with SPC probably in the early aughts. And it should be our responsibility to put together what a vision looks like and what it costs. Now, clearly we price out a status quo plan. So if nothing changes on funding, what could we afford to do? But then we also price out what are the improvements that this region deserves, and we can start walking backward from that. So this is a change in how Port Authority has done business. Doesn't mean that anything in our finance procurement departments have been wrong. It's just a new thing. It's in addition to. If you've recently seen a posting for a chief strategy officer in Port Authority, this is why. So we can easily say when a congressional representative calls or when the state legislature calls, what we want to be doing in 2037 and what that looks like in adjusted dollars. If we can't answer that question, we're never going to get the funding. So it is a big dream about what corridors are important and what kind of investments we want to make. We are not yet at the point of matching up modes or saying exactly which streets, but I'm speaking to a crowd of engineers and planners. We all know that as soon as you show where an exact street is, our public input goes away from the overall project and comes down to that very granular, where is my stop going to be? We'll clearly have those conversations, but now it's still big. So where are we at with Next Transit? We have identified 10 strong corridors for different levels of investment and improvement. The number one corridor that popped up is the Strip through Lawrenceville, through Oakland, and over into Hazelwood. I'm really happy to see that as the number one corridor, because we don't talk about this in all of these other settings where we talk about extending a busway or going out to the airport or upgrading the existing rail lines. So I'm inclined to think that we probably have paid really good attention to our data to get something that pops up that was sort of out of the realm of conversation. You see the list on the screen in front of you of some of these other corridors. And then what are some of the improvements that we have pulled together for that? We are spending a lot of time today talking about BRT from downtown through uptown and Oakland. And and imagine what about turning all of our busways into maybe some level of BRT infrastructure? Where else can BRT go? What works well for us? And a point I really want to stress on our BRT project is this is an infrastructure project. This is not just a transit project. We do famously live in the city where houses slide down hills, trains fall on train, and the pavement swallows buses. So we are a little different than our friends in Omaha or Indianapolis. They've got some really cool BRT projects going on. I really love the Indianapolis platforms because they're heated, they melt the ice. I think that's fantastic. Those projects are a lot more paint a lane and put up some bollards. So we're just dealing with a different universe. We're really the poster child for what infrastructure investment needs to look like in the US. But let's be honest about what our needs are. I mean, compromising so we can be the same price tag as Omaha isn't going to do anything good for the folks who live in Pittsburgh. We have different needs. So there's a lot which is built in there. Everyone has heard me opine about putting a downtown transit center, a very strong hub in downtown. One of my favorite things in my job is waving at bus operators and hopefully them waving back. But even if I'm waving at 8 buses in a row, that gets a little bit excessive. So what are better ways that we can serve downtown? We have a legacy system in downtown. So we are driving the vestiges of a 100-year-old streetcar network. System doesn't work like that now. So can we get a place where more of our routes can come together? People can transfer potentially inside, and then think about the development implications. If you've seen Union Station in Denver, think about that what can we build on sort of an edge of downtown that pulls together buses that the T can tie into, and maybe it's a launching point for future in-ground transit. So we're excited about that. We definitely know that we want to get our busway extended out east. There are neighborhoods that want us out of them so they can have good local service, but the heavy hauling transit on a busway. And there's neighborhoods that would like us more in their streets. let's have this conversation about what it looks like and accommodate this growth and these travel patterns. One question we've gotten a lot is, what about the library line? Are we going to tear it up and salt the earth? No, we are not. The library line has been there for a long time. It's got a potential to grow ridership. Right now, the ridership's low. That was true before the pandemic as well. But we acknowledge one of the reasons it's low is you're often walking through somebody's backyard or jumping across a creek to get to a station. That's a disincentive. So looking at the library line, the best use study includes what investments are needed if we keep rail out there, which is absolutely the goal. What kind of improvements do we have to make to start boosting ridership? If we don't make those, what are other options? And we can use this business case to make the argument federally and on the state level that we need more investment, or we just can't get library line to do everything that it needs to be doing and that it can be doing for our neighborhoods. So when we talk about that, I don't want people to think, oh my God, the sky is falling, we're pulling it back. We just need to make a compelling case to leverage better investment so we can do more with that line. And then also we talk about the Allentown line. God bless the Allentown line, or 3 years ago when Norfolk Southern landed near the Station Square station, we would have had to shut the rail down. We're probably one of the few places in the country that has this kind of relief valve. It's an old relief valve. Half the people I hear from in that area want the train to come back because they want the connections. The other half say their houses are old and we're rattling them to death. So what is a good neighborhood approach, and how do we come to some consensus about what to do about these other potentials for rail? So that's very high level. We are still at the point that we've just been unveiling our corridors, but please stay plugged in on this process. Please let us hear from you. It's a better plan with more voices. I'll turn it back over to, I don't know if I'm turning it over to Lynn or David, or where is my friend Chris?
Yeah, let's get Chris to unmute.
I will just mention the website, nexttransit.network/events. That would be a good place. This obviously is a very difficult map to see on your screen, but if you go to the website, there's actually quite a bit of additional information and background. And July and August will be important months for unveiling of the plan based on what we have heard today and some of the feedback loops. So I want to encourage you to go there. And with that, I'm going to take my presentation down and allow Chris to have his time.
Mm-hmm. Chris, welcome. If you could join us and talk a little bit about Mobilify Southwestern Pennsylvania and how you may interact or collaborate with the Port Authority and your transit in the future.
Thank you so much, Lynn. First off, I would like to apologize to everybody for that bio, and I will do everything I can to be not as convoluted as I was in writing that. So
it's fine.
Thank you all for joining us today. This is a great topic. I'm very excited and thankful to be in front of all of you, some of whom I've worked with in the past. Talk a little about Mobilify Southwestern Pennsylvania, where this fits in with the region, and from my perspective, and what we're trying to accomplish here. Before I start, I'd like to pick on both the BRT and the Next Transit discussions that the Port Authority had before I came on. I have to say, from my perspective, the process on both of these, where we've ended up, has been tremendous, I think. The vision especially, I think we have something to work towards over the next 10, 15, 20 years. It requires all of us to really get engaged in this if we really want to see the transit system we all want and deserve in many different ways. That's a small, Mobilify hopes to play a small part in how we bring that voice together to figure out how we move forward with this as a community, not as a planning agency, but as a community. So with that, I'll jump right into this. Give me a second here. So I've been at this work for well over a decade, as Lynn had mentioned early on. So starting this work at the Pittsburgh Community Reinvestment Group, now being able to bring it out to its own organization, dedicated organization, like many cities around the country have. Starting out, looking around the country, what I found is there's really two approaches that need to happen in Pittsburgh. One is your typical, public facing, we need to support transit, we need to support walking, support biking, walkable communities. And the other side of that is education and stewardship of, here are some ways this can happen locally. By the way, this is how things are working around the country, and we have a system that we need to and deserve to invest in, that in some ways was a trailblazer of its own back in the times when we built it, that everyone ironically is starting to catch up to us with, particularly our bus rapid transit existing system, the busways. It's also important now, I think, because from my perspective working here, particularly within the county and city, but also regionally and locally, the goals around mobility have been more closely aligned than I've seen in the 12 years I've been in this work, and probably the 15 to 20 years of observing transportation within Southwestern Pennsylvania. There's a lot of alignment to take advantage of within our region. The problem with that is, as I'm sure many can realize, we've been doing that for quite some time. This is just in the transit sphere that's in front of you right now. Arguably, I could add something from 1914 if I wanted to. We've been having these sorts of discussions for a very long time without a lot of movement on that. And what I've seen around the world is not necessarily, the country, I should say, it's not necessarily that we don't understand this Venn diagram of comprehensive vision, funding, new and existing funds, and the type of development we need to create so that these systems work. It's more a question on the process side of things. We often talk a lot about how fragmented Southwestern PA and Pittsburgh is. We may have an extreme case of that, but frankly, in the infrastructure world, that exists around the country, particularly when things start crossing borders into other cities and municipalities. And it's really within departments as well. If you look, for example, at the busway overpass in Wilkinsburg on Penn Avenue, there are at least 4 owners of that overpass. No wonder it takes so long for us to get to the point where somebody puts some substantial effort into repairing that overpass. And we don't really have a steward locally to push forward an agenda that has been agreed upon by leaders as well as grassroots organizations within our communities to help go beyond any particular cycle of leadership, keep the vision in place, and reaffirm the vision with the community. So what's been missing a lot here, as I'm sort of alluding to, is really this third sector approach, right? In a lot of other areas that we work in Pennsylvania and actually in this country, there's always that private, nonprofit, educational-based charitable organization that's helping make things move. That's how our culture does things. We haven't really had that in the transportation sphere in Pittsburgh. We've had fits and starts of it. We've had organizations that are focused on specific parts of it, but looking at the whole system and how it interacts with the community and how the community's goals are at the front of that hasn't really been here, at least for some time. This was identified in a region-wide assessment done by the Regional Transportation Alliance, a number of political and private sector leaders brought together by the Allegheny Conference and Pittsburgh Chamber to come up with these 7 principles you see along the bottom, principles that no one can really disagree with, I think, from my perspective. But there was also a list of projects, and the one that was really important, I think, that rings out for me and really was a springboard for this work with the Chamber and others, was this notion of an organization that helps bring together all the necessary stakeholders on significant projects, whether they're small station organizational projects, whether that's a corridor coalition, whether that's the countywide or regional approach to how we improve transportation, so that we can get the things that we want throughout the region. And I know there are varying degrees of opinion about river life, depending on who you are and what field you're in, but that's the type of approach of collaboration, especially as it had begun, that we're looking for here. And you can look to Sustainable Pittsburgh, Green Building Alliance, and others around the region that have done that sort of work to be quite successful at it, working with leaders of the public and private sector, as well as with communities. So this is where Mobilify comes in. Our goal here is to engage all communities to secure greater multimodal transportation choices, the land uses we need to make those things work, to create an accommodating multimodal transportation system throughout Southwestern Pennsylvania. And this is actually vital from a lot of perspectives. It's about bringing equity to a system that increasingly is not. It's about making sure that community voices are in these and putting people at the top of the pyramid as it relates to getting around. It's frankly about our parents and our children and our grandparents, making sure that they have the lives that they need and deserve to live in Southwestern PA, but all to be independent, but also to stay here whenever those children graduate school. And they're looking for those new jobs. This is really where the successful cities are right now, not heading, are. And we really need to embrace that move forward, I think. So the way we approach this is really sort of a three-legged stool. There's that traditional educational advocacy piece, the stewardship technical assistance side of thing. Mobilify is currently involved in several projects where there's not a lack of creative ideas in this region. How those get to ground is really the biggest challenge. And then how we get the resources we need fiscally, organizationally here, Harrisburg, in Washington, but especially here to really invest in ourselves, as so many cities have that are have been building very large expansion, capital expansion projects with their transit systems, as well as the development that needs to support those. Another way to break that down is really in the policy and education legislation side, getting catalytic things to happen, and ensuring that voices are involved in the big projects that could be very pivotal to the region, such as bus rapid transit, building on the experiences that, frankly, I've had throughout the time that I was at PCRG and bringing this now to organization. Our framework, and I will not read these off to you, the slide will certainly be available to folks afterwards to take a look at. It really is about collaboration. It's about building bridges between organizations and individuals. It's about helping to de-jargonize the transportation world. Those of you in development and elsewhere know that transportation has its own funding sources, its own timeline, its own view of what community engagement is. And oftentimes those things don't match up. But making sure that we get more of what it is that we want to see in our systems. I look to these organizations as really benchmarks. I won't go into all of them other than to say that several of them have done things that we look to bring to Southwestern PA, whether it's the Greater Valley Forge Transportation Management Association's corridor coalitions, whether that's the tremendous amount of resources that Move LA has raised for transit expansions in the LA basin, which I would say you need a super majority in California to pass a funding measure, but only 50% plus one to retract. As well as legislation that was moving through Sacramento to use TIFing for transit stations and requiring that funding to also be used towards environmental and social equity goals around those station areas. Lots of coordination. Citizens for Modern Transit has actually helped to some degree grow ridership in the St. Louis metro region, as well as restore the 35% service cut they faced in 2009. They've been involved in infill TOD development projects, and they provide a lot of transportation demand management advisement services, and also manage the state public transit association. So just real quickly here, and I know I'm running through this because I know we're very conscientious of time. There is an unmet need and demand. We have seen that, and it's not just in Allegheny County and Pittsburgh, it's throughout the region. Regional Transit Division has emerged within SPC, and then this great Next Transit done by Port Authority, which are working strongly together with. We have funding that we can optimize, and we need to do more with that. And we also need to have an organization locally that is working with all of you and beyond this room, beyond this Zoom, to create the systems that we all need and deserve within Southwestern PA. So I look forward to the discussion that happens after this, and I will stop.
Chris, thank you. I want to thank everyone today, Catherine, David, Chris, Breen, and Amy at the Port Authority for putting together this wonderful presentation. Before we conclude, did you have any other questions or comments, Catherine or David? You've been so wonderful to allow this time to discuss the project.
Nothing from me. Just
Okay,
thank you for the time and interest.
you've said a lot. Well, I'll just say in conclusion that I hope that everyone gleans from this presentation today that this is not just a city transit project, that the BRT is really a transit project of significant regional impact, and that the BRT will move us another step in becoming a 21st century world-class city. And that is why ULI wanted to present a program on the BRT today, because it falls very much in line with the mission of ULI, which is to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact. So thank you all. And again, I would like to add a special thank you as chair of the sponsorship committee to our program sponsors today, which are the ARIS Group, the Pacini Poland Group, the Pittsburgh Penguins, Bowler Engineering, GBBN, Civil and Environmental Consultants, HDR, Waller Corporation, Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership, and the Pittsburgh Innovation District. And as always, our annual sponsors are so critical to our mission and all of our programs throughout the year. With that, Jamie, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Lynn. And again, thank you to our sponsors today and our annual sponsors for your continued support. We could not do it without you. A huge thank you to Lynn for the amazing job that you did leading the charge for this program. And thank you to all of our speakers. We really appreciate your time and effort on creating the slides. I know, you're all very, very busy with this amazing project. As a reminder, this program was recorded. Give me a couple of days to do some video editing magic and I'll get it out to everybody. And we do have an exciting program coming up I wanted to share with everybody. Championed by WLI, ULI Pittsburgh is excited to bring to you our university master plan discussion on July 9th at 9 a.m. Till about 10:30. This program will be virtual. The link to register is in the chat right now. Just a little bit of an overview of this program. Higher education is without a doubt one of the most important sectors of our region's economy. Even after taking a big hit from the pandemic, Pittsburgh's universities persevered, responding to the immediate need while not losing momentum as they continue to prepare for the future. This session will include presentations on the master plan process underway at 4 of our most notable universities: the University of Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon University, Duquesne University, and Chatham University. Speakers include Bob Reppe, Senior Director of Design for Planning and Design for Campus Design and Facility Development at Carnegie Mellon, Rod Dobish, Associate Vice President and Chief Facilities Officer, Duquesne University, Owen Cooks, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Planning, Design, and Real Estate, University of Pittsburgh, Walt Fowler, Senior Vice President for Finance and Administration, Chatham University, and Kate Tooney, Partner at Rothschild, Doino Collaborative. I think I said that right. Apologies if I did not. So that is all we have for you today. Again, thank you all so much for attending, and we hope to see you in person soon. Have a fantastic Tuesday. Bye.